a godlike reputation. This reputation finally led him all the way to the top, when the Empress of Russia asked him to heal her son, who had been suffering from hemophilia. Despite his serious condition, Rasputin took away his medication, began praying for him, and miraculously, he got better. Whatever he had done, it earned him the trust from the most powerful woman in the country, and soon, the Empress became close friends with Rasputin, often depending on him for his wise advice. In just a handful of years, Rasputin's holy reputation had taken him from the bottom all the way to the top. But his divine, supernatural image had a dark side. Rasputin was an alcoholic, one that partied and had constant affairs with his followers. In 1915, police set up a secret surveillance team and started following his day-to-day activities. On the 19th of February, Rasputin was seen coming out of a building with two ladies. He never returned home until 3 in the morning. On the 10th of March, the police followed him through the city and saw him meeting up with a prostitute. On the 12th of May, Rasputin brought a different prostitute back to his flat and locked her in a room until she was later set free by a servant. Almost every other day, Rasputin was seen coming home with prostitutes and his own female followers, having drunken parties and singing from his apartment. Despite his wild life, he remained close friends with the Empress, and this brought him an immense amount of power. So much so that Rasputin started making his own political decisions, appointing new ministers, and giving advice on the war. The public was turning on Rasputin. To many, the Tsar and the Empress had become puppets, being controlled by the evil and corrupt Rasputin. At the time, the media wasn't allowed to report on this, but as things got more and more tense, newspapers were willingly paying censorship fines just to write about Rasputin's influence over Russia. All of this anger finally came out in November 1916, when politician Vladimir Purishkevich was giving a speech at the Russian parliament.
Зло исходит от темных сил, во главе которых стоит Распутин. Уже несколько ночей я не могу сомкнуть глаз, представляя себе эти письма и послания, которые этот безграмотный мужик пишет императрице. Царь больше не управляет, он сдался, Российская империя рушится. Теперь все распоряжения исходят от Распутина. Пока он жив, мы не сможем победить.
Although many across the country felt the same way, no one had expressed their hatred of Rasputin so openly, until now. In the audience that day was Felix Yusupov. Despite being part of the royal family himself, he despised everything Rasputin stood for. To him, Rasputin was the devil, and he had to be taken out in order to save Russia. And so, he called Purishkevich.
Ваша речь не принесет желаемых результатов.
Ну что ж, что можно сделать?
Избавиться от Распутина.
А кто это сделает?
В России есть люди, которые это сделают. И вы сейчас разговариваете с одним из них.
With that message, it was clear that both men were on the same page. And just a week later, they met on board Purishkevich's train, which was parked at a nearby train station. Yusupov had brought along Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's cousin, Dr. Lazavert, an old military friend, and Lieutenant Sergei Sukhotin. That evening, the 5 men came up with the grand plan to lure Rasputin in and kill him. Here's how they planned to do it. On the chosen night, the gang would meet at Yusupov's palace in the center of the city. At precisely 1 a.m., Yusupov would go to pick up Rasputin, driven by Dr. L, who would be dressed as a chauffeur. When they got back to the palace, Dr. L would park close to the entrance in such a way that would hide Rasputin from the street. They knew that Rasputin had 3 security agencies protecting him, so it was likely that spies would be keeping an eye on his every move. Once inside the palace, Dr. L would join the rest of the gang in a room upstairs, while Yusupov and Rasputin would go down to the basement, which the gang had turned into a lavish dining room. Here, the thick concrete walls would stop any screams or gunshots from being heard outside the palace. During the party, Yusupov would offer Rasputin various cakes and wines that had been laced with powerful cyanide poison, and if all went well, Rasputin would be dead in just 15 minutes. To get rid of any evidence, the gang would then drive to Purishkevich's train, burn Rasputin's clothes, and park the car on the cargo wagon, ready to leave St. Petersburg later that night. The gang would then walk through the city to another car and drive back to the crime scene. Finally, they would wrap up Rasputin's body, drive to a nearby bridge, and throw him into the Aisi river, hopefully never to be seen again. But all of this would only happen if Rasputin agreed to come to the party in the first place. They needed a way to lure him in. And so, Yusupov started faking chest pains and went to Rasputin for his healing powers. Throughout the month, the two met up several times, and Yusupov managed to become Rasputin's friend. With every meeting, Rasputin always asked to meet Yusupov's wife, 21-year-old Irina. Yusupov was never going to let Rasputin anywhere near his wife, but it did give him an idea. He told Rasputin that Irina would be throwing a party with her friends on the 29th and invited Rasputin to come and meet her. Rasputin, being the ultimate ladies' man, couldn't resist. The plan was set, but with so many moving parts, the gang needed a way to properly organize and manage everything. Luckily today, we have Odoo, an all-in-one management software that gives entrepreneurs the tools to simplify the day-to-day management of their business. What makes Odoo really powerful is that all the apps are interconnected, so you don't have to waste time juggling external tools or duplicating data. Odoo has a range of tailor-made apps to help with sales, invoicing, accounting, project management, website creation, human resources, and much more. Odoo's accounting app synchronizes with your bank account, letting you keep track of your successful business and making taxes easier by adapting to your local tax laws. It even automates repetitive tasks, so you can stop wasting time on admin and focus on growing your business. Odoo Sign allows you to create, send, and sign documents easier than ever, so no more searching for online PDF signers that don't work. Perhaps the best thing about Odoo is that everything you need is brought together in a single platform. All the apps talk to each other seamlessly, and it just works. Join the 15 million people already using Odoo using the link in the description. The first Odoo application is free for life. After that, as your business grows, you can easily add more apps when you need them, and have access to all the applications at an affordable subscription. The night of the assassination had arrived. It was a particularly cold evening, and by 11 p.m. the streets were empty. It was time to start the party. Purishkevich left his train at 11:15 and nervously waited to be picked up. At 11:50, 20 minutes later than had been planned, Dr. L pulled up beside him.
Опять опаздываете?
Извини, я чинил колесо, оно лопнуло по дороге сюда.
Purishkevich got in, and together they drove to the Yusupov Palace. According to their plan, the gates at the side entrance were to be open at a specific time. But by the time they arrived, the gates were closed. To avoid raising any suspicion, they kept driving and slowly lapped back around a few minutes later. But the gates were still closed. Purishkevich got out and entered the main entrance by foot, while Dr. L drove around until the gates were finally opened. They met the three other men in the dining room, where a large table was filled with pink cakes and other delights. Rasputin had told Yusupov that his spies didn't leave his apartment until just after midnight, so the gang had some time to kill before picking him up. Dr. L took this opportunity to start separating the cakes and grating the powerful cyanide poison into the cream layers. Then he poured several glasses of red wine and laced them too. Meanwhile, back at his apartment, Rasputin was getting ready for the party. For him, it was going to be another good night. Although he agreed not to tell anyone where he was going that night, he couldn't keep it in and ended up telling his daughter and his secretary. Back at the palace, the gang were adding the final touches to the party. In order to make it seem like the party guests had just moved upstairs, they placed left-behind bits of cake and drinks on the table and began playing music on the gramophone. With everything in place, Yusupov and Dr. L left to go and pick up Rasputin at around 12:15. 45 minutes later, the gang heard a car pulling into the palace. Yusupov and Rasputin entered the dining room while Dr. L joined the rest of the gang upstairs. So far, everything was running on time, and when the deed was done, the gang would make their way downstairs to hopefully find their enemy dead on the floor. For the next half an hour, the gang stood at the top of the staircase, trying to listen in to the muffled conversation. Then Yusupov ran upstairs to tell them that Rasputin was not eating or drinking anything.
Господа, все идет не так. Эта тварь не ест и не пьет. Что нам делать?
Потерпите. Вернитесь и попробуйте снова, но ни на минуту не оставляйте его одного.
Yusupov returned to the basement, and after another half an hour, the gang heard 2 corks being popped and the chinking of glasses. It seemed like it was only a matter of time now. But another 30 minutes went by and the conversation didn't stop. Yusupov rushed upstairs for a second time.
Это невозможно. Он выпил 2 бокала вина, съел несколько кусков пирога и, как видите, ничего не произошло. Абсолютно ничего. И хуже всего, он начинает спрашивать, когда же встретиться с Ириной.
Возвращайтесь. Яд обязательно сработает. Нужно лишь немного времени.
Yusupov rejoined his guest and continued to fake pleasant conversation. But with every glass of wine, Rasputin was becoming more impatient, and it seemed like his supernatural powers were somehow overcoming the poison. After another half an hour of constant drinking, Yusupov ran upstairs and told the gang that the poison simply wasn't working.
Это безнадежно. Может быть, мы покончим с ним в другой день?
Никогда. Если он уйдет сегодня, он уйдет навсегда. Мы должны покончить с этим сегодня ночью. А что, если я застрелю его? Быстрее и проще.
Хорошая мысль. Сейчас не важно, кто его убьет. Важно лишь одно. Он должен быть мертв. Сегодня. Во что бы то ни стало.
Without hesitation, Yusupov picked up his pistol and returned to the basement. It didn't take long until the gang heard a loud bang and a body hitting the floor. They rushed downstairs to finally see their enemy lying on the floor. His body was still twitching, and he let out a few weak breaths, but they were sure that Rasputin was finally dead. Without wasting any more time, they turned off the lights and continued following the plan. 3 of the men made their way to Purishkevich's train to start burning the evidence. Since Lieutenant S looked the most like Rasputin, he was wearing his coat. That way, any spies that were following them might think Rasputin was inside the car. Back at the palace, Yusupov and Purishkevich were trying to process what they had just done. It had taken them longer than expected, but their plan was almost over. But all of a sudden, they heard footsteps coming from downstairs and a door opening. To their amazement, the man they thought was dead was now staggering through the courtyard and headed straight for the exit.
Стреляй! Стреляй в него!
Purishkevich grabbed his pistol and chased Rasputin into the courtyard. Just as he was reaching the gate, 2 bullets fired out from Purishkevich's gun, but both missed. 2 people were walking by when Purishkevich began firing and quickly ran off. No matter how hard they tried, it seemed like Rasputin really was invincible. But Purishkevich let out 2 more shots, which finally struck Rasputin in the back, finishing him off. It was now well after 3 in the morning, and the plan had taken a chaotic turn. Rasputin was now lying dead at the gates of the palace, in plain sight for anyone in the street to see. Purishkevich ran back inside and came across 2 soldiers protecting the palace. He told them what had happened, and to his relief, they were glad that someone had finally killed Rasputin. The soldiers brought Rasputin